Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today to attend the EducationUSA webinar on HBCU, which is Historically Black Colleges and Universities and Women's Colleges in the US. I'm Sasada, EducationUSA advisor in Tokyo. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Okay, now I'd like to introduce EducationUSA quickly. EducationUSA is a US Department of State network of advising centers in more than 117 countries worldwide. We promote US higher education to international students by offering accurate, comprehensive, and current information and advice about studying at US colleges and universities. In Japan, we have 6 EducationUSA centers: Sapporo, Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Fukuoka, and Okinawa, run by the US Embassy, Consulate, and Fulbright Japan. If you have any questions, please get in touch with the EducationUSA centers nearby. This program is hosted by the EducationUSA Tokyo. Now, I'd like to introduce a little bit about our future events. On March 30th, next Wednesday, we will have another English webinar on 寮生活の意義, Why Live on Campus. And in addition, next Saturday, April 2nd, EducationUSA Japan will hold a spring virtual college fair and several webinars. So please come and visit to meet more than 40 US colleges and universities from 19 different states at this virtual college fair. Now, now please join me in welcoming 2 excellent speakers from the United States. First, I would like to introduce Dr. James Natsis from West Virginia State University and Ms. Jennifer Russell from Bryn Mawr College, Pennsylvania. Now, I would like to hand it over to you, Jennifer and Jim. Thank you.
Okay, I believe I'll start.
Yeah.
Yokoso, welcome. West Virginia, the state of West Virginia, wild and wonderful. And of course, to West Virginia State University. Oh, sorry. Not sure why it's not, there we go. So West Virginia State University, you can see the logo here with the yellow jacket, and you see some images of sports. West Virginia State University, this is a signpost, a historic landmarker. You'll find these in the United States a lot to designate certain events that happened in the past. West Virginia State University, first public Black college in the state, founded in 1891 as West Virginia Colored Institute. In 1927 was the first fully accredited Black land grant, and we'll talk about this, land grant college in the US. In 1915, became West Virginia Collegiate Institute. In 1929, West Virginia State College, integrated 1954, named West Virginia State University in 2004. So we see a very long history for West Virginia State University. And of course, the United States is a relatively young country to a country like Japan and other countries. So for us, that's quite historic. Now, just a couple images. There's all different types of peoples and different types of studies we'll talk about in a few moments. This happens to emphasize a little bit more the sciences, biology, health sciences, nursing program here at West Virginia State. Also, just some people in, like our former president, Dr. Carter, signed an agreement with the ambassador of Benin in West Africa. In fact, this is me in the background here from quite a while back. And I directed a program for 3 years in Benin. So I visited the country 3 different times. We worked with their libraries and helping them digitize their catalog systems. We had a group of young ladies from Pakistan visit us. These are a couple of our faculty members at a conference. Dr. Park is from Korea. These are 2 American professors, someone from Ethiopia, someone from Vietnam. And here's our former president, Dr. Carter, signed an agreement with president of a university in Mexico. So we've had different types of relationships around the world at different times. Now, a land grant, it's important to understand also like land grant as well as with HBCU. Now, HBCU is historically Black colleges and universities, historically Black college universities. So a land grant university, also called land grant college or land grant institution, is an institution of higher education in the United States, designated by a state to receive the benefits of the Morrill Acts of 1862 and 1890. The first Morrill Act in 1862 was created to fund educational institutions by granting federally controlled land to the states for them to sell, to raise funds, to establish and endow land grant colleges. So they're granted land, so called land grant. The mission of these institutions was to focus on the teaching of practical agriculture, science, military science, and engineering as a response to the Industrial Revolution and changing social class. Higher education at that point was mainly liberal arts. Now we're looking at a period during our Civil War where our country almost divided. And so education was limited to just a smaller amount of people back in those days. And so this was an act by the government to appropriate lands and allow them to be funded to increase educational opportunities for people. The second Morrill Act was passed in 1890, aimed at the former Confederate states. When we say Confederate states, we're referring to the southern states during the Civil War that, and we know that in those states, there was the whole system of slavery. And so there was, and there still is today, certain types of problems, but historically, this act required each state to show that race was not an admissions criterion, or else to designate a separate land grant institution for persons of color. Well, obviously, in certain parts of the country, race was a problem. A lot of institutions, most institutions would not allow people of color, as we say, people are Black and others, they could not integrate these institutions. So among the 70 colleges and universities, which eventually evolved from the Morrill Acts, are several of today's historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Though the 1890 Act granted cash instead of land, it granted colleges under that act the same legal standing as the 1862 Act colleges. Hence the term land grant college properly applies to both groups. So West Virginia State University was established in 1890 as a land grant institution, along with other institutions that were historically Black colleges. There we go. The 1890 land grant system. So there's a group of colleges and universities now called the 1890 land grants. And those are referring to certain Black institutions like West Virginia State University. You see it's highlighted on the bottom here. And we're not going to name all of these, but you can see different state institutions, Arkansas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida A&M University, et cetera. Tennessee State and Kentucky. So these are Black colleges here, and they're part of the same group of the 1890 institutions. So why go to an HBCU? Now, first I want to explain that in historically Black college, some of the universities that are Black have a very, very high percentage of African Americans and Blacks. They're not exclusive. You can go to those institutions, but there are a lot more Blacks. West Virginia State is a little more particular in that there are more non-Black students than Black students, because the state of West Virginia only has maybe about 4% or 5% at most Black population. So it's kind of unusual in that regard, because mainly when we talk about HBCUs, we're talking about much more dominantly Black student population, internationals, whites, Hispanics, Asians, whatever composition. And West Virginia State tends to be a little less Black in its composition, although institutionally and historically and currently, it holds very strongly to these principles and these roots. So some of the reasons to go to these types of institutions is that it offers a certain type of value for the amount of money that people pay to go to college. And in the United States, it's very expensive to go to school if you don't have scholarships. Some institutions are just out of reach for the average American. So a lot of the HBCUs, and especially West Virginia State University, is very reasonable. The state of West Virginia is a small state, and a lot of people need opportunities that they don't have the money to go to very expensive institutions. So I'm not going to read all of the details here, but there's opportunities for people, especially for African Americans, to study in technology, engineering, mathematics, also liberal arts, all types of fields, okay? And for tuition rates that are a lot less expensive than in other parts of the other types of institutions. It meets the needs of low-income first-generation students. So I think, especially in American society, there's a very big wealth gap, a difference between those who have a lot of income and a lot of resources and those that don't. And obviously, because of the historic circumstances, a lot of African Americans don't always have the same amount of wealth as other people in the United States. So this has always been an opportunity for African Americans to have access to education. They go to, African Americans are in every type of institutions, obviously. So this helps to reduce the wealth gap by, if they don't have access to education, and I know the Japanese are very much value the importance of education. And so we know that education helps us, people grow in their lives and have more opportunities. The campus climate fosters success. And obviously, if you're Black and you're around other people who are Black, it creates an environment where you feel more empowered and you feel like you belong, as opposed to being an isolated person, and also addressing the nation's under and unemployed crisis. So it's not of any help in any country in the world to have too many people that aren't employed. So the better training they have, the better access they have to education and training, that it lifts the whole country up. And HBCUs are a true value for people in the community, rooted in faith, community, and service. Black churches have long been pillars of the Black community. You know, the churches are a strong institution for African Americans. And so there's a lot of bonds and a lot of friendships and a lot of community between the HBCUs and the greater Black community. So here's a picture at large of West Virginia State University. It's a nice wide shot of the campus. So why would what's it like to study at an HBCU? our West Virginia State University. Close relationships with faculty, students, and the community. Many programs to choose from. Living in West Virginia's largest city. Now, the state of West Virginia is small. In Charleston, and certainly in Japanese terms, it's very small, but there's more to do in the Charleston area than in some other parts of the state. And as I said, sometimes you might think, if you're Japanese and you think, okay, well, this is a Black college in HBCU, but it's not just a Black college. It's all types of people that go there and work there. So it's a very diverse population. A lot of sporting events are on campus, a lot of other types of events to get involved in, and it's a clean and safe environment. And I think it's very important to be someplace that's safe, clean, it has a lot of nature. So we're not going to go through all the general information. These are things that could be discussed at a different time. A lot of academic programs, the full-time undergraduate, $6,800 out of state, undergraduate and graduate, $9,000 is very, very reasonable. Now, this was a few years, like the previous year. So it's very similar cost, which makes it a lot more approachable for people from out of state and obviously international students. I personally I do international studies, Spanish, French, and general education. And so we see the makeup, about 3/4 of the students are Caucasian, white, 8% African-American, but also the multiracial and undeclared would probably fall within a category more of being Black or mixed, and Asian, Hispanic, and others. So we just see some pictures here. Thank the stinger, from the bee. Thank you for wearing a mask. Well, slowly we're getting away from this. Hopefully, we don't know how long these things will last with the mask. Why would a Japanese student want to study at West Virginia State University? So Charleston, like there's it's a state capital. So each state has its own capital. So it's an opportunity to understand how the U.S. government is structured and learn more about how a state is structured. It's a safe campus. It's inexpensive compared to a lot of institutions of higher learning, and it has a diverse student body. Japan is an important trade partner for the state. There may be employment opportunities for Japanese students who want to stay there. And the state is very spacious, a lot of landscape, a lot of mountains. So it's a very peaceful place to be. And you see sports. Obviously, the Japanese love baseball, tennis, soccer, a lot of sports. For some reason, when I think of the Japanese, I think of baseball. And there's some good players that come to the United States. And the Japanese are known for being good in baseball. It's a nice picture here, the campus. And then you just see some, like this is Charleston right here. And then you see the river, the Canal River coming through. We're located like over this way a little bit, maybe about 7 or 8, 9 kilometers this way on a nice interstate. And you see the bridge here that goes down over the river, and people jump off of this once a year. There's a day called Bridge Day where they do the bungee jumping. And you see some other pictures of nature. This is the Capitol complex in the city. This is the minor league baseball here, and some street scenes, the river on the other side of the Capitol here, some houses. And we're not going to go into details here, but the Japanese are our friends. Japan and West Virginia celebrating 25 years with Toyota. A plant is located in West Virginia. Also, the NGK spark plugs celebrates 20 years in West Virginia. So it's an important trade partner for us. We have a trade office in Japan as well. And some restaurants, we see like a Taste of Asia with Thai and Japanese, Hibachi Express. And just, I'm not sure if I'm covering up stuff here, but you can see a few places here, some miso soup and and nice foods that a student will always find some Japanese food somewhere. I think in most parts of the United States anyway. And domo arigato.
All right, thanks, Jim. And let me get my screen on. And share in the beginning. Okay, all right. So thanks, Jim. I actually learned a lot about HBCUs. And I'm going to talk about a different kind of institution, women's colleges, and highlight Bryn Mawr College in particular. So my name is Jennifer Russell, and I'm the Associate Director of Admissions. And I have been working with our international recruitment for about 20 years now, and very happy to talk about women's colleges because it's near and dear to my heart, I guess. So we'll start with women's colleges, and there are not as many women's colleges as there used to be, and I can explain a little bit why. But women's colleges are indeed located throughout the United States. You can see all the little red dots there in terms of the location. We do tend to have a kind of a disproportionate number of institutions on the East Coast, but they do range all over the US. So as Jim was talking about some sort of history, obviously the United States has a history of excluding people, and that was the case very much for women in the beginning of the history of the United States, that women were very much excluded from most higher education institutions. So there were separate colleges and universities set up for women because women couldn't attend, the Ivy League, for example. So many of these institutions did become co-ed, did accept men and women together, but it happened relatively recently in our history. And so I'm going to highlight a couple of these the women's colleges, and to give you a little bit of the history there as well. So in the bottom left-hand corner there, you're going to see a little box. It's called the Seven Sisters. So the Seven Sisters are 7 women's colleges that were founded way back in the 1800s, when all of the Ivy League was all male. So women could not attend any of the Ivy League. So to get the same kind of education that was available to men at that time, there were these sister schools that were founded as sister schools to the Ivy League. And you can see them named there. We're a pretty famous little group in the United States. We're certainly not the only women's colleges in the United States, but Bryn Mawr is one of the 7 sisters. So I have to give a shout out to the 7 sisters. There are 2 women's colleges that are also HBCUs, and Spelman and Bennett College as well. So that's a little bit kind of a highlight of the history of women's colleges, how they came to be. And we really have found that there are some very distinct advantages to going to a women's college. There have been really quite a few studies done in terms of what advantages there are for women at women's colleges, especially in terms of sort of involvement, engagement. So for example, the studies have found that women at women's colleges may be more apt to attend events, to apply for leadership positions, to engage with faculty, to even talk in class. So all these sort of engagement that women tend to do that more at women's colleges than they might at a co-ed institution. And as you can see on this slide here, we really think that there is a disproportionately high level of career success among women at women's colleges. Nice little stat there that 2% of the US graduates are women's college graduates. But 30% of Business Week's list of rising women in corporate America went to women's colleges. So I think that's a pretty impressive statistic. Then I also wanted to highlight that an advantage that women are 1.5 times more likely to major in STEM at a women's college, and twice as likely to go on to medical school and earn doctorates. So in terms of the quality and depth of education that women are getting at women's colleges, really steer them towards advanced degrees and STEM, something that women have not been overrepresented in the STEM fields, but at women's colleges, we are completely represented in the STEM fields. So I highlighted just before a few advantages of women's colleges and sort of the experience of women's colleges and the advantages in your sort of educational realm. But there are a lot of really personal and just personal advantages, I guess, to being at a women's college. The community is so strong at a women's college. And these studies have found that women are more confident, more involved, as I mentioned before, in terms of their academics, but also outside of academics. And these communities continue and have connections well beyond just the 4 years that you spend at the college. There's a tremendous network of women alums that you can become part of for the rest of your life. So that really is an important aspect. So I'm going to transition and just talk a little bit about Bryn Mawr in particular, and give you a little snapshot of what one women's college in particular is like. So Bryn Mawr, we do have a funny name. It's Welsh. It's a very good trivia question in case anybody asked us. Welsh means high hill. Our hill is not really very high, but that's what it means. And we are located just outside the city of Philadelphia. So we're on the East Coast of the United States, sandwiched right in between Washington, D.C. and New York. That's the city of Philadelphia, and it's the second largest city on the East Coast. But we are just outside the city, so we're definitely not in the city. We're in a suburban location, and in a few weeks, those cherry trees that sort of on the top up here, our campus is going to look like that in a few weeks. So we have a wonderful tie to our cherry trees, are tied, I guess, a little bit to your cherry trees, in that one of our first international students was Hbcus. So I'm hoping I'm saying that right, and it will populate in the subtitles there. But Suda of College. So Emiko Suda actually studied at Bryn Mawr, and we've had a long connection with Japan and Suda College in particular. So we have an exchange program with Suda College that students from Bryn Mawr spend a year at Suda, and then the reverse as well. Suda students spend a year at Bryn Mawr. So it's a very nice connection that has been going on for a long time. So just a few kind of facts and figures about us. We are about 1,300 students. So each class, as you can see there, is just under 400 students in each class level. Our students come from all over the world. We have a really diverse population of students. The little bit hard to see, but you can see where this incoming class came from. Overall, we have about 1,300 undergraduates. About 20% are international, and we certainly have students from Japan, but we have students from really all over. And they all come from all over the United States as well. California is very well represented at Bryn Mawr. You can see there that 14% are underrepresented minorities. And there's some information about test scores and the admission rate and those kinds of things. As I do work in admissions, would be happy to talk a little bit more about that, about the actual admission and application process, but just wanted to give you kind of a snapshot. On the bottom left there, you will see a large number. As Jim was saying during his presentation, college in the United States can be tremendously expensive. And we do know that. And that's why 78% of our students receive some kind of financial aid. So we are an expensive institution, but we do have financial aid. And we do meet full demonstrated need for any admitted student. So that's really important to know, that we want to make it really possible for students to attend. So one other thing that's, I think, particularly unique about Bryn Mawr is our connection with Philadelphia, as I mentioned before, but also with several other colleges in the immediate area. So you can see them listed there: Haverford College, Swarthmore College, and the University of Pennsylvania. So the four colleges are kind of in a triangle, really, geographically, because basically Bryn Mawr and Haverford are at one point of that triangle, and then the University of Pennsylvania and Swarthmore at the other points. Now, the other three colleges are co-ed, or mixed men and women, and students can take classes at any of those institutions. Haverford College is the closest, both in proximity and relationship. So there are literally hundreds of students every day that take in classes at Haverford, and the reverse is true as well. Haverford students are taking classes at Bryn Mawr. So you will have men in your classes. It might be just one or two, or it could be a very mixed class. It kind of varies by the department and the class and the time of day. But there's a bus that you can see there that runs back and forth between Bryn Mawr and Haverford, I think every 20 minutes. So it's and it takes 5 minutes to get there. So it's very easy to do. Swarthmore and Penn are also part of this consortium. They're a little bit further away, so not as many students participate, but they are in our consortium, and we have these partnerships, which really gives students an expansive opportunity in terms of both academics and social activities as well. Just a snapshot. So I guess I'll go back to this one. So most of our students, believe it or not, did not start out thinking that they were going to attend a women's college. Most of our students are interested in a liberal arts and science institution, and that's very much what we are at our core. But students are a little bit surprised that the fact that they ended up at a women's college, there's something about that environment that really resonated for them. And most of our students, and certainly our alums, cannot imagine anything else in terms of their experience. Just a snapshot of a couple of students, and I can talk about very different paths and that they have taken. We are indeed a liberal arts and science college, and our students are pretty well versed in terms of their academic interests. About a third major in math or science, about a third in social science, and about a third in humanities. And double majors are very possible as well. This is to highlight some of our connections with other regions of the world and experiential learning. So that is an important part of Bryn Mawr as well in terms of internships and travel and research opportunities. We're an old traditional college, but yet we've got some pretty innovative and active programs as well. This slide is to highlight some of our traditions. So Bryn Mawr has a variety of traditions, these celebrations that students participate in over the course of the year. And some of these events are silly, and some are serious, and some are secret, but they're so very, very, very much part of Bryn Mawr. And again, something that students will talk about really for the rest of their lives. Here, just highlighting what some of our students do after graduation. We do have many students that are going on to graduate school. Probably, I don't know, almost 3/4 of our students will eventually end up in graduate school. Oftentimes students take off a year or two, but many do go on to graduate school. But you can see that the business is well represented in terms of fields of employment, education, health and medicine, science, communication. So really a pretty wide variety of what our students are doing. And I'll end with this slide of what that graduation day might look like. And just one of my favorite quotes really at the bottom there that one of our alums shared at one point, but Bryn Mawr is a place where you can come as you are and grow into what you want to be. So I'm going to stop there. Lots more to talk about, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we have some questions that I will read out. Jim, are you able to see the questions, or I can read them?
No, I don't.
Okay. No worries. No worries. This is a team effort. So the first question that I see here, are there any specific or unique curriculum or programs, especially at women's colleges? Oh, okay. Yes and no. And someone from EducationUSA maybe is chiming in as well, but
Yes. Hi.
I saw something pop up. Did you want to?
What?
Okay, sorry. So anyway, in terms of special programs and curriculum, it really depends on the school. Most women's colleges tend to be liberal arts and sciences, but there are exceptions, and there are nursing programs and there are business programs. So it's a really pretty wide variety. One of the questions here, is there a list of HBCUs or women's colleges somewhere online? And I'm sure that there is. Jim, do you have a resource for that?
Well, the United Negro College Fund, probably the best resource for HBCUs. United Negro College Fund, UNCF. I guess it's uncf.org.
And for women's colleges, there's the Women's College Coalition. So we usually point students towards that. And that is a website dedicated, obviously, to women's education. And we'll list all of the women's colleges that are available. Okay. It's probably not going in order per se. Here is one. Do you offer online degree programs? And can students earn a degree? Well, yes, we know that we can earn degrees at our institution, but how about online programming? Jim, is there any online programming yet?
Yeah, there are some online degrees, online courses, like most universities now. Sometimes with international students, I'm not sure what the limitations are that students that come to institutions in the United States have certain requirements of being in presence. I think they can take a limited amount of classes. It's like being in the States and doing degrees. You'd have to ask somebody that knows more about that. I don't know if you know more about that, Jennifer.
Yeah, there are limitations with visas and all sorts of things in terms of being online. But, you know, I mean, I think one of the really important things about an American education is being at the campus and being in the community. So that is not a strength of ours. It is not a strength of ours online programming, because our strength is, about the sense of community. And 90% of our students live on campus and want to. It's very important. Would you tell us what kind of measures are taken at the university and dormitories in terms of COVID?
Well, in our case, obviously, it's still an issue. It seems to be diminishing a lot. There are sanitation stations, the strict following of codes that have been laid out by the state, that the state is directed by the federal government and the Center for Disease Controls. I think most institutions are pretty similar in following these protocols. So there's a lot of safety and a lot of investment involved in making sure that students stay healthy.
Yeah, the United States is a complicated place. We have 50 states and 50 plus different policies. So every state is different. But at Bryn Mawr, we've done a lot of testing of our students. Really during the course of the year, we've been in person. So students have been on campus and learning in person this current year. And everybody's pretty much still wearing masks. All right. What kind of students are more suitable for women's colleges than co-ed colleges? I love that question. Because most students aren't necessarily looking for women's colleges. So I think what students find is that there's something that resonates with them, not necessarily because of attending a women's college, but maybe it's the community, maybe it's the diversity, maybe it's the academic rigor, all of these kinds of things. So I think many more people than you might imagine are extremely well suited for women's colleges. You know, I'll say that it's just a very, what's the word? Very close-knit sense of community, very comfortable place to be. And women are not shy and sheltered in a women's college. They are active, they are engaged, they are doing, and they go out into the world to do all of that as well. So we all know women's college graduates who are not shy, sheltered women, you know, Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, you know, all sorts of women that are very far from shy and sheltered. So.
Hey, Jennifer, if I can add, you had mentioned Spelman as one of the two HBCUs. Well, my wife is a graduate of Spelman, but she taught Spelman, and I think being an HBCU, a Black college, and only one of two women's Black colleges that she did see Spelman. And interestingly, though, in the case of Spelman, it shares a larger campus with a boys' school and a co-ed school. So there's kind of like three campuses there. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. But I will add also that Bryn Mawr is, I thought it was a woman's name actually. But I learned something from you, but it's a name that's known. You know, I think most of us have heard of Bryn Mawr, even if we're not familiar with the details of Bryn Mawr. It has a name that has a strong history and known by a lot of people in educational circles.
Thanks for that shout out, and yay for Spelman, one of our sisters. Love it. Another question here. Does West Virginia State University offer financial aid for international students? And how about other HBCUs?
Well, I can't speak for other institutions. Just like Jennifer had mentioned, we have 50 states and tend to have different policies. So each institution is different because some HBCUs are private. They're very small. We have one in Kentucky as well. I'm in Kentucky at this moment. We had our break, and I moved between a couple of states, and it's a very, very small one with like 100 students. So, and then ranging from something that small to much larger institutions. And so West Virginia State, as far as applying directly to West Virginia State for financial aid, most of that would be like government monies and people who are Americans. It's a little more complicated. Now, what does happen is scholarships, like people receive, especially for sports and for other types of scholarships. So, and as a graduate student, somebody who comes as a TA, which would be like a teacher's assistant, or a GA, which would be a graduate assistant. So probably, and one reason why we see more in general graduate students who are internationals than undergraduates in general in the United States is because of opportunities for receiving these GAs and TA fellowships and scholarships.
Thanks. Here's another question for you. In fact, do you think HBCUs tend to have strong programs in the field of science and engineering and agriculture compared with non-HBCUs because of their history?
Well, once again, it's a big country, right? So Japan's a smaller land, but it's a great, huge population. In the United States, we have a large population and a lot of land. So somebody might be like 3,000 kilometers away from us. And so there's differences. Obviously, each institution has their own strengths. And so, you know, we do have a bioengineering program in our institution. We do look at our sciences as being strong. But as far as it being stronger or not stronger, it's also a matter of opinion, because sometimes somebody thinks something's better than somebody else might think.
And this might be our last question for both of us. Let's see, do you accept transfer students, and do you have any agreements with community colleges?
would that be for me, or are you? I'd just say, of course, we take transfer students, and we do have agreements within of community colleges, which I think is probably more normal, or partnering institutions like Jennifer was talking with Bryn Mawr having close by institutions. So certainly transfer students.
Yeah. We have some transfer students. It's a pretty small population, though. It's so, I think students really kind of be there for the 4 years. You could be a guest student, and that's what our students are that come from SUDA college that just transfer or just come for 1 year as a guest student, but that is a little bit different than a transfer student.
I would just add that it's interesting that you say that, because I would say that we have a lot more transfer students than probably what Bryn Mawr has. And I think that because we're less expensive than a lot of institutions, and also often students go to a bigger college, let's say like West Virginia University in our state and Marshall University, that are bigger, are out of state. And then they might leave school for a while, because that happens in the United States a lot, where somebody might go for 1 year, for 2 years, especially if they're non-traditional students. So we get some students that maybe they got married, maybe they had problems in their family, or for some reasons. And then often they would look at West Virginia State University as a place they could finish up their degree as well. So I think also because we're in the capital city, and that it's what's the thing about the United States is it's not complicated linguistically. Most of us speak one language compared to some countries with many, many languages, but it's a big place with a lot of people. So there are a lot of variety in one place to another.
And I think that's our question.
Thank you. Yes, you finished all the questions. Thank you so much, Jim and Jennifer, for your great presentations, and also for answering so many questions. Thank you so much for your, excellent presentation. We learned really, so much about HBCUs and also women's college, and as well as your own programs. So I really appreciate that. And then, lastly, Jim and Jennifer, can you say something? I mean, do you have any final words to those students who like to study in the US in the future? Can you say something, Jim?
Jennifer?
Oh gosh. We really do want international students coming to our campuses, and it makes such a difference. We have had international students at our campuses for a long time, so we're really eager to have you consider us. And I'd be happy to connect with any students that are interested in particular about Bryn Mawr and getting connected and sort of looking at that application process.
I would say I personally, I speak French, I speak Spanish well, both languages, especially French. I speak parts of many other languages because I've traveled a lot. I studied in other parts of the world. So it's a beautiful experience to go somewhere else and to have a chance as being a young Japanese student, to have a chance to go to like the United States or even somewhere else. I'm not just speaking from my institution or even from the United States. Try to learn as much as you can about different people, a little bit of different languages. And if it means you can come to the United States, if it means you can come to West Virginia State University, visit the state of West Virginia, wherever you end up going, it's always going to be a benefit in your life.
Well, thank you very much for your great presentation, as well as the nice words to attendees. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed your presentations, and your answers to the questions. So once again, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you very much, Jennifer, for your excellent presentation, also as well as staying late at night. It's midnight there, right? So I'm so sorry about making you wake up so late, but thank you so much. Thank you. So please
Thanks for the
stay
opportunity.
happy and safe. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you again for organizing. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Bye,
thank
everybody.
you.
Okay.
Bye. So we will stop the webinar now here.
Okay. Bye.